Jennifer and I went to Iceland this summer. Iceland is extraordinary in many ways, one of which is it is empty. I looked it up. Iceland is 100,000 square kilometers, about the size of the state of Kentucky. It has only 375,000 people. It is an island and many more sheep. It is an island far north in the middle of the cold ocean, far away from continents. By the way, I looked it up, and Durham, I think, has about 285,000 people, just the city. Jennifer and I were two of 2 million people who visit each year, most of whom visit during the summer, as Jen and I did. But even as the island population swells, everything is still quiet. There are small crowds at a few trails around the most popular waterfalls, but most everywhere are vast open spaces. One morning, one of our planned excursions got canceled, so we did a 1-kilometer walk from the hotel through a field to a black sand beach. We saw literally nobody. In the middle of the peak summer season, there was no one on the trail, no one on the beach. We looked out at the vast ocean and saw no ships. There was us and vast amounts of space. We also visited Israel this summer. Israel is the opposite. Crowded. It is 4 times smaller than Iceland, but in that tiny sliver of dry, hot land live 10 million people, another 5 million in the West Bank and Gaza. One afternoon at Hartman, I walked to visit one of my teachers in his apartment. I turned left uphill from the Machon, then turned left on another street, and as I walked down this street in the middle of the summer, there were walls. Not of water, but of concrete and fence, miminam umismolam, on my right and on my left. It is typical in Israel, there are walls sometimes 3 feet high as you walk on the street, sometimes 6 or 7 feet tall, and quite often on top of the walls are fences with metal pointing outwards to make it harder or impossible to scale the fence. These walls and fences are a common feature of Israeli neighborhoods. On the block where I was walking, there was a school. I have visited Israel for 30 years, and I have never seen in those 30 years a school in Israel which did not have a high fence surrounding it with a security guard checking people as they come in and out. During my trip, people send articles to the rabbi. Someone sent me an article about anti-Semitism in Iceland. It was entitled, "A Study of Anti-Semitism in a Country Without Jews." Iceland has virtually no Jews. There is a little Chabad in Reykjavik, but that's very new. There's no history that I know of a Jewish community in Iceland, but according to the article, Icelanders have always feared isolation, and they've readily embraced anything new from the outside world, including anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism stands out, according to this article, as an anomaly in a country that prides itself on tolerance, its free spirit, and its unequivocal defense of human rights. I don't believe that anti-Semitism is widespread in Iceland, but where it is found, it is embraced in the way a nerdy kid will sort of go along with the newest fad to be part of the in crowd. Iceland's isolation and vast distances create a longing for connection, while Israel's close quarters, its threats of terrorism and violence, make it build walls. as Israelis crave a little part of the world where they can feel safe and secure, where they can enjoy a little peace and quiet. As I walked in Jerusalem, I thought about this dichotomy, and I wondered how these places might teach and learn from each other. And lately, I've been thinking about how proximity and distance deeply affect our culture and our community and our lives. Yesterday, I spent the day driving, visiting various congregants around our community. I probably put 50 miles on my car. And as I drove, I was thinking about two new tshuvot that were passed by the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards in late July on driving electric cars on Shabbat. One of them permitting, the other one forbidding. The CJLS has approved contradictory papers before in the tradition of our sages who said, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chayim, both these and these are the words of the living God. But beyond the technical aspects of the paper on which the authors disagreed, all of the authors of both tshuvot and many who wrote concurring and dissenting opinions, everybody admitted that the question of electric cars on Shabbat is not really about the technical issues. It's about proximity and distance. It's about a much deeper question, which is how do we keep Shabbat when we live far apart? How do we stay in community when we live at such distances from each other? After World War II, many Jews moved out of the crowded but intimate urban areas in the United States into the suburbs. And in doing so, we moved farther away from each other. In 1950, the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards issued its famous, or depending on who you're talking to, perhaps infamous, driving tshuva. Rabbis Morris Adler, Jacob Agus, and Theodore Friedman permitted the use of an automobile to attend synagogue on Shabbat, saying, where a family resides beyond walking distance from the synagogue, the use of a motor vehicle for the purpose of synagogue attendance shall in no wise be construed as a violation of Shabbat, but on the contrary, such attendance shall be deemed as an expression of loyalty to our faith. The tshuva has been criticized in recent years because it is a hard halachic argument to make. Lighting a fire in a combustion engine is a clear and seems a clear technical violation of Shabbat halacha, of Jewish law, but the tshuva was part of a much larger program of the conservative movement 75 years ago to reinvigorate the observance of Shabbat in America. Many people don't know that Heschel's famous book, The Sabbath, was actually part of and publicized as this larger initiative to reinvigorate the observance of Shabbat in America. And the two new tshuvot have that same intent. Rabbis Marcus Mordechai Schwartz and Chaim Wiener argue that even if an electric car solves a technical challenge, driving is not in the spirit of Shabbat, both because of traffic, as anybody who's ever been in traffic can tell you, but also because in covering long distances, it gives us a power over nature that is at odds with Shabbat, where part of our experience is to feel our smallness and to let go of our dominance over the world of space. And because there's something deeply important about living in close proximity to each other. It affords us the opportunity to be part of each other's lives more and more easily. It makes it easier to have Shabbat dinner or lunch, or to visit if someone's sick, or to bump into each other. One of the reasons that I love Bethel being in Trinity Park is because it's part of a walking neighborhood. Rabbis David Fine and Barry Leff, who approved the use of an electric car, did so with a similar goal in mind, recognizing that it's ideal for people to live walking distance from the synagogue, but when we can't or don't, that we may drive to synagogue and to each other's homes for Shabbat dinner and to other things that increase the enjoyment and our observance of Shabbat. I'm less interested this morning on which tshuva I support and what's permitted and what's forbidden. I'm more interested in us noticing how geography, whether it's in Iceland or in Israel or Durham or Chapel Hill or Cary or Bahama or Carborough or Ashborough, the communities of our community, how proximity deeply impacts our lives. I visited one of our members yesterday. She's in a good care facility, but spends many hours alone. She looked at me and said, "If my children lived closer, it would be better." Judaism is not just about prayers and blessings that we say in the synagogue. It must speak to all parts of our lives, including the choices that we make about where we live. If we live close, community still doesn't happen by itself. We still must seek out connections. But if we live far, it is up to us. We have to make the effort over and over and over again to close the distance. Only then will we experience the richness of community that the Torah and Shabbat are trying to offer us. Shabbat Shalom. Please rise, page 184.